Hello! This is the video a lot of you have been waiting for. We finally went and, well, we'll say upgraded the starter in our car here. We have a 1982 EXP, but the starter is going to be the same across all of these gas-powered EXPs and 81 to 90 Escorts. So the original starter is quite the hunky unit. It's even bigger than this fan motor, which alone is quite large. And I know this looks large, but trust me, you'll see a side-by-side photo in the thumbnail of the original versus this one. Now this starter comes out of a Vulcan Taurus in tempo, so that's going to be the 3-liter pushrod V6. If you see a starter for a 3.0 DOHC engine, that's not the one. Anything dual overhead cam, that's going to be the Duratec. That uses a different transmission and a different engine, obviously. It's not going to work with this. But the Vulcan one, oh, it goes straight into these cars, baby. Oh, yeah. And it also relocates the starter's solenoid down there, you can see. So the question is, what's the pros and cons of this? Well, it's smaller, it's lighter, it seems to draw less amps. That was the main goal. Anyone who's had these cars long enough knows that they eat through solenoids pretty quick. This is not the original one. I see it's already been replaced. All my other cars, they've all had it replaced once, 2, even 3 times, depending on the car. And it's just because the starter draws so many amps, and that's even with a freshly rebuilt engine. One that's got a buttload of miles and maybe not the greatest oil pressure, or if it's driving an automatic transmission, all that equates to just more load on the starter. But even if you're lacking all that load on the starter, it still draws plenty of amps, even if it's new or remanufactured. I've tried each to know. So I thought I'd give this a whirl. Being it's smaller, more compact, it's more modern, so in theory it should be a lot more efficient, and it relocates the starter solenoid directly to it. So whether there's less loss going down the wires to it, debatable. But it takes up less space, which is a big deal if you log a lot of miles on these things and find yourself changing these semi-regularly. Clearing the exhaust manifold is a great deal in these. Fighting the large guy out when you have factory air, it's kind of a pain in the butt. Anywho, how did we wire it? Well, it's got the starter solenoid on it that you can see there. We'll try getting the camera a little closer. So you can see there's that small silver stud. That is going to be our switch. That's our control. So when you turn the key, 12 volts goes to that and triggers the solenoid. And then the copper stud on the right, the one with the big red wire, that is what goes all the way over to our positive terminal on the battery right here. Otherwise, everything else kind of remains unchanged. To do this, we did have to lengthen the signal wire. In this instance, I just used a bullet connector, stuck it in the female bullet socket that just would normally go on this threaded stud here. They don't ever contact that good, so they're prone to failing. Pro tip, if you can squeeze them with pliers, they bite harder. But I like this even more. I'm quite fond of this. It's too cold out for me to fire up the soldering iron and heat shrink this like I wanted to, but it will be the next step sometime this week. So we extended that signal wire out. It's that thin red wire. Goes all the way to the spot on the solenoid like we showed. And now, the only fancy part we did here is just on the existing solenoid. We left it in place because I don't want to have to lengthen all these wires here. That's kind of the only con to this whole deal, is if you don't leave this old solenoid here to act as a junction terminal for the positive posts, you would have to lengthen all those wires that say fusible link, and then obviously the ones that go to the starter. So what you would do is normally the battery cable would go from here to this large post, and then imagine this red one not being here. The red one would actually go from this post all the way down to your starters. When you turn the key, 12 volts goes here. These two short together, power goes to your starter. In this case, we have power going only to this one lug, so 12 volts is always going to the switched components within the car like it always has before. So we're not changing anything in that regard. And then we've ran a big cable off of that same post down to the battery's positive post on that solenoid. So when it's all said and done, everything works perfectly. And literally the only altercation we had to make was extending this one wire. And depending on what kind of cables and wires you're using, you may have to make the holes at the ends of the lugs larger. But that's on a as needed basis. But so the grand question is, how does it work? Well, I'll have my assistant here turn the key, and then you'll hear it for yourself. And just like that, we're up and running. So you can hear it turns kind of quick, but the big thing is you can tell it draws a lot less amps. Just standing here, the old one was consuming a bunch, and all my other ones are the same way. Again, didn't matter if it was new or remanned, they all drew a bunch. But this one, it's laboring a lot less. It turns the same speed. You're not really going to see any kind of improvement there. But keep in mind, I got a really cheap replacement. If you spend $50 to $100 on a decent one, you know, that could be a different story. You might actually have one that turns out faster and draws even less, or weighs even less, or is just, you know, like 2 millimeters smaller if you're out there racing and stuff. But otherwise, I see this as a very positive upgrade. I will list the size differences in the description, as well as where you can find these. That would be as in what exact model car to be looking under, and if I run across any Ford part numbers, I'll try sharing those. And then I'll also share a weight on each of these. And yeah, you'll be able to see for yourself how great or not they work. Take my word for it, they're a decent upgrade. Just keep in mind, if your old one is making any kind of grinding noise, you need to replace that pronto. I've had them where the bearings dry up in them, and then what will happen is the shaft gets a little slopped out, and then that starts making noise. And then shortly after that starts making noise, the end cap, you know, there's like a aluminum cover down in there that kind of shrouds the pinion gear. That will bust clean off inside the transmission, and you'll have that rattling around in there while it's running. That's bad freaking news, man. But yeah, we are A-OK and psyched to be driving this again. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. I answer them pretty frequently. We'll see you later.